Part 118. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 1175. On the outskirts of Linglan, there is a deserted mountainous area. The group of people drove the car and stopped at the edge of a small forest. After getting out of the car with a bang, there were 5 people in total: Garen, Kongxingxiu, Nine-Tailed Fox, and the Yureva brother and sister who wanted to be trained. The group of people were all wearing dark green military uniforms, with some random things hanging on their bodies, and each of them was carrying a large backpack, which looked very heavy. After getting off the car, the Nine-Tailed Fox took the lead and walked forward, deep into the woods. This is a temporary base specially used by my men for training. You can stay there as long as you want. I will give it to you for free, the Nine-Tailed Fox said generously. Thank you, Garen nodded. Then he looked at Yureva aside. My training for you will begin here. Understood, Yureva replied loudly. For Garen, he felt that he was full of mystery. He was obviously just an ordinary middle school student, but he was able to come into contact with so many mysterious things. He also seemed to have a weird network of people. His powerful sword skills were obviously more honed from actual combat. Let's go. Garen followed the Nine-Tailed Fox forward quickly. Yureva brother and sister quickly followed. Kongxingxiu walked at the end. Passing through several tripod surveillance towers in the woods, there are rotating monitoring instruments above the towers, emitting tiny red lights. This is the scanner system installed in the base. It can scan all movements within a range of 250 meters in all directions. Nine-Tailed Fox introduced. It cost me tens of millions at the beginning. She introduced as she walked inside. Soon a small turquoise pond appeared in the woods ahead. The oval-shaped small pond looks a little sticky, and you can smell a faint odor. This is the destination. The Nine-Tailed Fox pointed at the pond. Destination. Yureva brother and sister and Kongxingxiu were a little puzzled. Garen walked to the edge of the pond as a matter of course. He turned around and looked at Yureva. This is the place for you to train. Yureva walked to the pond and looked at the water below inexplicably. Garen showed a mysterious smile. This is the most suitable place for you. In order to train and strengthen your strength in a short period of time. Really? Yureva looked at the smelly water in the pool and couldn't think of anything that suited him. Don't believe it, Garen smiled slightly and kicked hard. Bang! Yureva was kicked directly in. There was a huge splash of water. Yuriji and others were slightly shocked, but they still suppressed their doubts. They also knew that Garen would never harm Yureva, so this move was obviously part of the training. Brother Deo, Yureva jumped out of the water with a confused look on his face. This is your training, Garen smiled. My training. Yureva was confused. Not only him, but others were also confused. Garen made a gesture. Lift your right hand and look at it. Hearing this, Yureva raised his arms in confusion. The entire exposed area on his arm was actually covered with dense black leeches. Strips of dark brown leeches clung to the back of his hand, with their tails hanging down, like a small forest of black ropes, swaying. Yureva shook the leech in his hand. Is this a leech? He roared violently, and his whole face instantly turned blue, then purple, and finally deformed. OMG! This thing immediately rolled and crawled towards the shore. Tisk tisk. There are at least 34 of them, so popular, the Nine-Tailed Fox sighed. Yes, Garen nodded. Yurija on the side covered her mouth with worry on her face, while Kongxingxiu watched with cold eyes, holding her hands, as if she were watching a monkey show. What are you afraid of? Garen stepped forward and kicked Yureva back as he was about to climb ashore. Didn't you notice? Brother Deo. I'm about to die. Really? I'm about to die? You're not training to kill me. Yureva was about to cry and fell back heavily. This time, every part of his body was exposed, except for his face. They're all leeches. I can't even pull it off one by one. It seems you still haven't noticed. Garen shook his head. Just stay in there. At the same time, the nine-tailed fox took out the rope that had been prepared, with a sinister expression. 10 minutes. Urawa was tied up and thrown into the pond, leaving only a breathing face. Help, he screamed in agony, but Yurigi didn't come to save him. Instead, he was pulled by someone and said something. After a few moments of hesitation, he gave up. You take your time in the bath, we're going to eat first. Garen waved his hand and led everyone inside, where a small room could be vaguely seen. 2 hours later. Urawa is dying. 3 hours later. Urawa is completely dying. 5 hours later. Urawa is already dying. It's dark. Uravar already? Huh? It's dark. He opened his eyes and found that he had fallen asleep. There was a person squatting by the pond. It was Garen. Are you awake? Garen said calmly. Did you sleep comfortably? Comfortable. Apart from being a bit smelly, I haven't slept so well in a long time, Urawa answered honestly. Did you find it? Garen asked calmly. What? Urawa was stunned, and then his somewhat hazy consciousness immediately realized that what he was in now was a leech pond. Ah, he screamed again. Scream, Garen slapped him on the head. If leeches could suck your blood, would you still be alive now? Well, that's true, Urawa immediately realized. He immediately raised his hand and looked at the back of his hand. There were still many dense leeches hanging on it, but it was obvious that their bodies were not full at all, and they had obviously not absorbed any blood. What's going on? He finally calmed down and asked blankly. What's going on? You have to ask yourself. Garen stood up and said, feel it carefully. Your body is instinctively refusing to be sucked blood, and the leeches regard you as some kind of mother body that can cling to you. As mother body. Mother's body, Urawa asked confused. Yes, to feel and master your body's instinctive abilities, this is the true meaning of this training. Garen slowly left, not bothering to pay attention to the sky. Uravar himself has this ability, and all he has to do is attract this ability, that's all. It was getting darker and darker. The water was getting colder and colder, but Uravar didn't feel cold at all. All exposed parts of his body were covered with a thick layer of leeches. Ability? I have it myself. He murmured in a low voice, seeming to realize something was wrong. Indeed, none of the leeches sucked his blood. But it's just hanging on the skin, like short ropes. Can he succeed? This way? Kong Xingxiu asked in a low voice. He and Garen stood nearby from a distance, quietly looking at Urawa in the pond inside. Maybe, maybe not. Garen did not answer affirmatively. His ability has already been inspired after the last battle, and now, what I have to do is to really let him understand this ability. Use. But it does look disgusting. Kong Xingxiu covered her nose, looking at so many leech suckers on my skin, my scalp is numb now. Just get used to it. Galen simply sat up in a cross-legged position on the ground. I'll take a rest first, and when you find that he can break free of the rope and come ashore, you call me. Okay, Kong Xingxiu nodded. Garen also had his own plan, and he could use this time to forcefully upgrade his sword skills by one level with his soul ring. From the time he decided to upgrade to now, the soul power accumulated during this period is enough to upgrade his sword skills once. In fact, such an improvement originally consumes very little soul power, but because this world has great restrictions on the suppression of pure energy such as soul power, Galleon has not accumulated enough until now. In the past, he would have ignored this consumption of soul power at all, because there was no way to detect the amount of consumption, and it almost seemed like no consumption. His eyes fell on his own skill bar. Garen soon locked onto the project where sword skills were involved. Unnamed sword technique, the third level, the realm of transparency Dzogchen. A very simple introduction. After all, it was only based on the various sword skills he had mastered before, so it was just a very common derivative technique. Garen tried to guide his soul power and slowly came into contact with this skill. The soul power is like strands of transparent thread, slowly but surely approaching the skill bar. Laugh. A slight murmur rang in Garen's ears, and he saw the soul power being absorbed by the skill items greedily and crazily, as if they were alive. On the surface, he was still sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. Kong Xingqiu leaned on the tree trunk boredly, watching Yuruwa in the distance, and did not notice Garen's movements at all. It can't be found either. Nothing unusual happened to Garen. All the soul power threads quickly penetrated into the skill bar and disappeared. And new changes are gradually appearing in the sword skills column. Unnamed sword skill add 1, unnamed realm, effect, all sword skills add 1 speed, strength, precision. Produce unknown changes. Garen had a slight expectation in his heart. His own abilities had reached the pinnacle of the physical body in this world, and the unknown changes caused by forcibly advancing the first-level sword skills were a special ability that only the ancient Yinduo civilization had. Forcibly pushing the originally ordinary abilities to an unprecedented height with the power of the Soul Ring. It's a pity that I didn't find the potential point. Otherwise, using the potential point to improve might be a way. Garen stood up from the ground with regret. Seeing that Kong Xingqiu had fallen asleep leaning against the tree. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 1176. He raised his hand and looked at his watch. More than 3 hours had passed. He barely felt the passage of time. It's really hard work. Garen stood up and walked to Kong Xingqiu. The movement of this woman opening her eyes can give people the illusion of a sound effect. She was very alert and woke up as soon as Garen came near. Garen understood that the reason why everyone paid so much attention to Yureva was obviously because of his identity as the real protagonist. He had heard the nine-tailed fox tell him the original plot once. Although it was not very detailed, he knew the general outline. The entire plot followed Yurevar. Riva is leaving, so it is also what they must do to follow up on Yureva's movements at any time. Now that Yureva has not awakened the ability that he should have awakened, it is obviously possible because of the different influences brought by their time travelers. Therefore, in order to make up for this impact, this aspect needs to be made up by their time travelers. It just so happened that Yureva came to Garen looking for the power to become stronger, so Garen readily agreed. "How is it?" he asked softly in the darkness. "Fortunately, I seem to have realized that I have realized it." Kong Xingqiu nodded and stretched out her hands to straighten her long hair. The fiery red long hair showed dark red under the moonlight, coupled with her bright eyes and slim figure, it gave a mysterious and pure temptation. "I heard from the nine-tailed fox that no matter how she tempted you, you still unswervingly chose me," Kong Xingqiu said calmly. "Is it true?" "What do you think?" Garen asked, showing a hint of a smile. "I think it's possible, so I came here to ask you." Kong Xingqiu continued with one hand on her hips. "To be honest, I was really satisfied with my original brother Kong Xiaofei. Unfortunately, I suddenly found out later that he had been replaced by Kong Xiaofei. Can you understand the contradiction that I felt very unhappy but understandable at the time?" "Understood. We are all the same people. Presumably the original Kong Xiaofei would have the same emotion about you occupying Kong Xingqiu's body." Garen nodded. "Yes." Kong Xingqiu nodded, "so I started to test your attitude. Unexpectedly, you turned out to be a gentle type that was unexpected. So unknowingly, I found that I had fallen deeply in love with you. Always like to tease you, like to watch your every smile and every move. Oh, by the way, smile is not very suitable here. Of course, you can understand that I am such a person. It is not my nature to like perverts. But it was indeed my instinct. Just after I discovered some perverted nature in you, so I fell in love with you. Do you believe what I say? Do not believe. Actually, I don't believe it myself. I'm just trying to test your perverted nature. Kong Xingxiu's inner personality obviously came out again. Originally, I thought that in this dangerous environment, the two of us were alone. As long as you made a little move, a weak woman like me would be unable to resist and would be pinned to the grass by you and make a. I thought you would be very excited and take action, but now it seems that you are still a safe and harmless creature. While I breathed a sigh of relief, I also felt disobedient and sad in my heart. So, do you want me to do this? That's why you say this, or don't you? Garen smiled. Press you hard on the grass, take off your clothes and underwear, and then use my vagina to enter your vagina hard, so that you can enjoy both pain and pleasure. Absolutely. I suddenly thought this was a great idea. What a bad nature. Look, it's revealed now, Kong Xingxiu said, taking 2 steps back and staring at Garen's face. Didn't you seduce me yourself? Xiao Shuexiu. Uh-huh. Garen's figure suddenly stepped forward and hugged Kong Xingxiu with one hand. She obviously went back to change her clothes first. Her dark short skirt and black stockings wrapped her round and slender legs tightly together. After being startled by Garen's sudden movement, she turned around and wanted to run away. But he was immediately hugged from the waist. Ah! The exclamation could not be heard, and his mouth was covered by Garen's other hand. The white t-shirt was pulled back tightly, making it look even more charming and alluring in the moonlight. Hiss! Garen stretched out his nose and sniffed deeply into her hair. It smells so good. After coming to this world and deciding to completely relax his mind, he suddenly found that many of the desires he had suppressed before slowly began to rebound and grow stronger. What do you want to do? Kong Xingxiu's body became completely tense. Although this guy was not embarrassed at all when he talked about dirty jokes, it was actually the first time for him to be so close to a man. Long strong muscles completely surrounded her whole body. The strong smell of hormones penetrated her nostrils, giving her a suffocating feeling. What do you think I want to do? Garen laughed out loud. If you hadn't told me first, in the dead of night, the moon is dark and the wind is high, shouldn't I have pushed you down on the grass and done some sex? What's the matter? You can't resist anyway, he whispered in Kong Xingxiu's ear. Isn't this kind of thing something that should be consensual? Kong Xingxiu was obviously getting stiffer and stiffer. How can you do such a common thing as a pervert? At least before you think of something more perverted, this kind of thing, ordinary methods are simply insulting to your noble status. She began to relent. Are you still being stubborn? You. Kong Xingxiu was speechless now. Don't worry, Garen said with a smile, and his other hand began to move upward slowly. Oh, did you see something incredible? Suddenly a lazy female voice came out from the side of the woods. It's a 9-tailed fox. Wearing a white tight-fitting leather outfit, she walked slowly out of the depths of the forest. Garen also stopped and gently let go of Kong Xingxiu. Did you record it? He asked with a smile. Just now I did a classic pose that I had planned in advance. The corner of the 9-tailed fox's mouth showed an evil arc, and he gave a thumbs up. Great posture. Kong Xingxiu was panting heavily on the side, with sticky sweat oozing out from her whole body. Seeing this scene, I didn't know that I was set up by these two people. You two adulterers, she shouted angrily and loudly. So, I told you this beforehand, right? Regardless of the external personality or the internal personality, when faced with this kind of thing, a woman's physical instinct will be defeated. The 9-tailed fox smiled proudly. Just like a little fox. Garen also walked over from the side. The two of them took out a small micro camera from nowhere, opened it and admired it with admiration on their faces. What do you want? Kong Xingxiu's voice came from the camera. Just like the poor little girl who is about to be raped. Okay, Garen looked at Kong Xingxiu with a sneer while holding the camera. Hand over all the remaining negatives. In exchange, I can give you all these things. Kong Xingxiu had almost calmed down by now and stood up straight. To actually use such despicable means. I'm a pervert, Garen said matter-of-factly, shouldn't I use despicable means? That's right, Garen is known as a despicable saint. Who told you to look down on him? The nine-tailed fox said softly. I found it. Suddenly Uriwa's voice came from afar. Oh. The three Garen men immediately stopped joking and walked out of the dark woods. From a distance, you can see Uriwa standing alone in the middle of the pond, half of his body submerged in water, but he is surrounded by groups of black leeches. The leeches around Uriwa suddenly fell down like raindrops, and each one was extremely shriveled, as if they had been drained of water by something. Seeing Uriwa's condition, the nine-tailed fox was stunned for a moment. Such a strong ability? It seems that he has gained a lot. Next, it's time to move on to the next item. Garen took a step forward and stood by the pond looking at Uriwa. Next item. An open playground full of green lawns is surrounded by various monitoring and interference equipment surrounded by the base. There are two large earth yellow circles in the center of the playground, which seem to be two large pits. The sun was shining down from above his head, and Garen stood quietly in the middle of a pit, holding a wooden knife upside down in one hand and wearing an ordinary white t-shirt and jeans. The soft short red hair is constantly flipping in the breeze. As the main purpose of this training, your mission goal is to use the knife in your hand to cut me. Garen looked at Uriwa, who was slowly walking down the pit from the opposite side. I'll cut you. Uriwa looked at the wooden knife in his hand. The wooden sword, which is more than 1 meter long, has a slight arc, slender. Does it count if it sticks to the corner of my clothes? Forget it. Garen smiled, not caring about his attempt to be clever. He snapped his fingers, and not far away Kong Xingxiu appeared on the edge of the pit with gritted teeth, holding something like a timekeeper in his hand. Next, I will stand still here for 2 hours, Garen said calmly. And if you use your sword to stick to any part of my body, even my hair, you will pass. Isn't this easy? Uriwa smiled and saw his sister Yurigi appearing next to the pit again. There was obviously a trace of worry on Yurigi's face. Brother, your body is still injured. It's okay. Uriwa waved his hand, it's almost better. He turned his head and looked at Garen. Brother Deo, can we start? Of course. Garen's lips curved slightly, you can do it at any time. Yurigi shook her head by the pit. Brother Deo really underestimates Brother Deo. In the sea before, he was able to face such a terrifying and powerful guy. I hope brother will be careful and not hurt Brother Deo. It's because you underestimated your headquarters commander, the nine-tailed fox next to him said with a smile. Although I don't know what cruel battles you have experienced before, the true power of Kong Sci-fi is not something you can understand. Clang. As soon as he finished speaking, in the pit, Garen maintained the posture of holding the blade upside down with one hand, as if he had not moved at all. Uriwa, who had just rushed over, was thrown up high and landed on the soil not far away with a bang. The black training tights were dyed into a ball of khaki and covered with dust. Ahem. He stood up immediately and stared at Garen, who was motionless. The previous relaxed look has disappeared without a trace. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 1177. What happened just now? Uriwa recalled the scene that suddenly appeared just now. He rushed over quickly and slashed straight at Garen's thigh with the wooden sword. Then he felt that the wooden sword had been swung in vain, and he was thrown high into the air, and then was thrown several meters away. Come again. Uriwa patted the ashes on his body and rushed over quickly. The wind ahead, he shouted, and the wooden sword drew a line close to an arc, quickly slashing towards Garen's waist. That was the gap where the wooden sword in Garen's hand was tilted and not blocked. Bang! There was an inexplicable sound, and Yureva once again felt his eyes blurred, and his whole body flew up out of thin air. Then there was a spin. There was a pain in my hip, and when I regained consciousness, I had fallen to the ground not far away again. Come again. He yelled and rushed forward again. Bang. Come again. Bang. 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 The sound of being thrown and thrown out one after another sounded. Yureva tirelessly rushed towards Garen in the middle of the pit again and again. Then one time he was thrown away for no apparent reason. Every time he got up, he tried to rush from different angles, but unfortunately, he never succeeded in getting within 2 meters of Galleon. As soon as they stepped into it, the world was spinning and they were thrown up. What the hell is going on? Yureva kept recalling the whole process of being thrown away in his mind. There were bruises and swelling everywhere on the body, and waves of pain continued to spread from all parts of the body. Sweat flowed down the forehead and temples, and it felt itchy across the face. A few drops of sweat almost got into my eyes. Hateful. There was a feeling of annoyance in his heart. Can't I even see the movements clearly? A trace of newly realized abilities slowly emanated from his body, which were invisible soul power fluctuations. Yureva leaned down and arched his body. His whole body was like a cheetah about to prey, sharp and peaceful. Brother Deo, be careful, I'm going to get serious. I can't control this new ability myself. Garen did not speak, but with a hint of smile, he held the wooden knife horizontally in front of him with one hand, and his whole body seemed like a mountain that would never collapse. Hydra. A name flashed through Yureva's mind instinctively, and the soul power emanating from his body suddenly turned into a thin, insect-like thread, which directly adhered to Garen's body, absorbing something inexplicable. Yureva instantly felt that his body became much lighter. It really works. A flash of joy flashed through his heart. He rushed forward with his feet and slashed horizontally with the wooden sword. Tisk. Ding. The wooden sword drew an arc and slashed out at twice the speed as before. Then the tip of another wooden knife was lifted up accurately, and the blade was hit by the tip of the gallon knife. A strong force was transmitted along the blade to the handle, and then to Yureva's body. Call. He flew out again involuntarily. Bang. His body fell heavily to the ground, where it had been dropped countless times before, and severe pain surged into his brain. Why, Yurewa's vision was blurred. Why, he tried his best to lie on the ground and look in Garen's direction. My ears seemed to be unable to hear any sound, and my consciousness was clearly unable to hold on due to excessive consumption. Why, still failed. But Hydra's ability really allowed him to see clearly how he was thrown out this time. Just once, the tip of the knife touched the body of the knife, and then using prying force, he flew out like a cloud and missed. What's wrong? Came the voice of the chief. Isn't this possible? It's only been an hour. Brother, my sister's cry seemed to come from far away. Beside the pit. Yurigi covered her mouth and looked worriedly at Yurewa, who was struggling to get up from the pit. Brother, how could that happen? He was someone who had faced off against a Tyrannosaurus cyborg. Even if he could defeat such a bloody massacre robot, how could he fall here? The nine-tailed fox looked at Garen in the pit, with a hint of interest and seriousness in his eyes. I told you a long time ago that you underestimate Xiao Fei's strength too much. A hint of wonder flashed through Kong Xingxiu's eyes, but it was still suppressed by her strong self-esteem. That's all. I only bully children, she snorted, pretending to be disdainful. Don't worry, he's fine. Your sword brother is measured. The nine-tailed fox looked at Yuriji's worried eyes and couldn't help comforting him. Yeah, Yuriji also noticed that although her brother was constantly being thrown away, he was not really injured once. I also suppressed the worries in my heart a little. In the pit. According to the opponent you described, Garen said, the opponent you want to defeat is the type whose advantage is the speed of shooting. In other words, he is good at instantaneous bursts of speed. He gently drew the wooden knife with one hand, making a gentle chirping sound. So I'm going to deal with you with a simple quick burst. Use all your strength, see my movements clearly, then avoid them and successfully hit me. This is what you have to do. Garen's voice it went directly into the ears of Uravar, who was lying on the ground. He lowered his head, showing no expression. Originally, he thought that after a series of battles, the gap between him and the commander-in-chief would not be that big, but now it seems that the commander-in-chief's strength is like a bottomless pit, and it is almost impossible to see the bottom. The figure standing there was like an indestructible mountain that could not be crossed. Huh. Hiss. Huh. Hiss. He drew longer and longer with every breath and breath. After resting for a while, I seemed to have regained my strength. Uravar got up from the ground, held the wooden sword upright in front of him, and clenched it with both hands. Been taught a lesson. Use all your strength, Garen said calmly, although I don't know where you get these weird abilities, but in my eyes, there are only two outcomes in battle, life and death. Life and death. Uravar knew that the sentence meant to warn him that if it was a real battle before, he would have died countless times. Come on. Garen once again raised his wooden sword. Uravar clenched the handle of the knife tightly with both hands, and finally his soul power rolled over his body, and strange changes appeared on his body. The Savior's power was finally fully activated by him. His muscles began to swell and his skin began to turn purple and red. Puff. The first step of stepping hard on the ground, sent a slight shock in Uravar's heart. Bang. 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 Amidst the continuous sound of footsteps, Uravar was like a warrior sprinting with a desperate heart. The soul power of his whole body was roaring, and the strength of his whole body was gathering. He rushed towards Garen with all his heart without hesitation. Like a hero charging towards a giant. Looking at his changes, especially the changes in his eyes, Garen showed a smile. Standing there quietly watching him getting closer and closer, like a roaring tiger charging at him. The wind ahead, X2. Two identical shouts sounded at the same time. The same move lit up in both hands. With the same move name, the two wooden knives drew exactly the same arc trajectory. Ding! The tips of the wooden knives pressed against each other for the first time. The tips of the two wooden knives were aligned with each other extremely accurately, and they were able to withstand each other perfectly. Yuri covered her mouth and couldn't help but open her eyes as wide as possible. The nine-tailed fox was also slightly moved. The original casualness has also become somewhat restrained. Kong Xingxia clenched her fist slightly and looked at Garen with some confusion. The wind blew slowly. It was not a natural wind, but a gentle wind driven by two wooden knives. The sword technique is like the wind but exceeds the speed of the wind. The wind in front of the wind in all directions is one of the essences of Garen's own sword technique. But now his move was blocked by a student he had only taught for 2 months. I have no energy left. Garen knew this. It's interesting, the curvature of the corners of Garen's mouth became wider and wider. He looked at Uravar, who was facing the tip of his sword. This little guy who thought he could be easily abused actually surprised himself again and again. Should I be said to be worthy of being the protagonist of this world? Even he couldn't help but feel a flash of jealousy in his heart. Although he only created sword skills at will, if he wants to catch the unreserved wind of his move, he needs to at least master the realm of transparency and reach the realm of sword master. Uravar has not received any orthodox sword training, and her martial arts level is not high, but she has combat intuition and instinct that far exceeds that of a beast. Her inhuman intuition allowed her to capture a miraculous breakthrough point in an instant. That was the only place where he could keep up, the tip of Garen's blade. This is also the only flaw in the front wind. There is no perfect thing in the world. No matter how perfect something is, its own perfection represents a flaw. Because perfection represents perfection, and perfection represents self-sufficiency. It is closed to external communication, that is, it cannot go any further. This is a taboo on any path. Therefore, in the wind ahead, Garen placed the only flaw at the tip of the fastest blade, which was the most difficult place for the enemy to capture. Even masters with the same speed as him could hardly capture this point. But Yureva did it, moving at a much slower speed than him. Zheng. The two wooden knives broke free and made a crisp sound of gold and iron clashing. Yureva took a few steps back, but Garen still stood there without making any movement. The two of them were breathing heavily, sweat dripping onto the loess. The other person didn't even break a sweat, he just stood there quietly, as if he had never moved. The two extreme situations are in sharp contrast. For a moment, there was no sound around the entire venue, and even the three people watching did not make any sound, for fear of disturbing the two people at this moment. Everyone can see that Urawa is at a very critical moment now. If he could master the essence of that sword strike just now, it would be equivalent to crossing the gap in combat power in an instant and reaching the realm of Sword Master. Although it is only a moment of super-level performance after all abilities are turned on, it is enough to amaze anyone. You must know that even for Galleons, reaching this realm is to realize the Dachan at the final point of the first world. The so-called Sword Master is actually the king of the century level in the world of secret martial arts. Further up is the level of inducing extraordinary power through realm, but it is restricted in this world, so in this world, the highest level is the Sword Master level. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 1178. Have you rested? Garen said calmly. Call. Urawa took a long breath, stopped his whole body, and his eyes exuded a fighting spirit that he had never seen before. All right. Come on. Garen's face showed a trace of seriousness. First. For the first time, his left hand also grasped the hilt of the sword. At this time, everyone realized that he had only used one hand from the beginning. With just one right hand, Urawa could hardly breathe. An invisible pressure naturally radiated from Garen's body, suffocating Uravar slightly. So strong. He summoned up all the strength in his body again, whether it was the borrowed power from the Savior or the newly realized power of Hydra, everything turned into instinct. Puff. He took a fierce step and rushed towards Garen again. In an instant, the two wooden knives collided straight into each other. Dang! The summer breeze is warm, the leaves are blown with a rustling sound, and the sunshine is also shaking and trembling. There are golden fragments everywhere where you see it, as if the entire forest has turned into a golden ocean with sparkling waves. In the pit, Urawa lay on his back in a large shape on the ground, breathing in the fresh air, regardless of the sweat on his body that wetted his body with loess. He was too tired to care. The endless exhaustion almost overwhelmed him at any time. Yurigi hurried down, carrying a basin of water and a water bottle. He squatted next to his brother and carefully wiped the sweat and dust off Urava's body with a towel. Snapped. Footsteps came from nearby and stopped next to Urava. It's Galleons. He looked at Urawa on the ground with complicated eyes. The wooden sword in his hand had been broken into two pieces at some point, leaving only half in his hand. Have I passed the test? Urawa asked out of breath. Garen was silent for a moment, then suddenly closed his eyes, seeming to be thinking. You're not even close yet, he said in a low voice. Forward. Urawa suddenly smiled bitterly in disappointment. But this time, you have passed. Garen suddenly turned around and walked away, holding the remaining half of the wooden sword on his shoulder. He didn't notice the excited and joyful smiles of the Urawa brother and sister behind him. The nine-tailed fox jumped down from the pit lightly and walked towards Garen. You are really arrogant. You want to save face. When the two passed by each other, the nine-tailed fox whispered with a smile. Whatever you say. Garen was not in a good mood. It's your time now. Of course the nine-tailed fox nodded and walked towards Uriwa lightly. You're doing this, and your ability is so high. Don't you know that it will be difficult for me to guide you? She walked up to the two brothers and sister and looked at their confused expressions. Okay, your headquarters commander has entrusted you to me. Regarding the training of long-range attacks, I will guide you. The nine-tailed fox showed a fox-like smile. After one day, the Uriwa brothers and sisters were taken to an empty basement by the nine-tailed fox after resting all day. The entire basement walls are made of black metal walls, and there are small pits and traces everywhere on the walls. I don't know what they were used for before. There is only one entrance around, and the door used to open and close is a heavy metal wall 3 meters thick that rises and falls vertically. The two brothers and sisters were standing in the middle of the basement wearing body armor, each holding a powerful pistol in their hands, with dull expressions on their faces. It was obvious that they had not expected that Juwiahua, a little girl who looked like a student, could actually being able to get such a terrifying murder weapon. The image of the mysterious student that was originally attached to Garen and Nine-Tailed Fox was suddenly shattered to pieces by these two guns. The Nine-Tailed Fox stood opposite them, with his back against the wall. He was wearing a black tights that was almost like nothing. Even the subtle outlines of his chest and lower body could be vaguely seen. It was the kind of sexy tights that would make elementary school students blush. Clothes. Garen and Kong Xingxiu stood aside and watched. Next, the nine-tailed fox said softly, I will train you how to deal with intensive range and rapid attacks. According to the opponent you described, the opponent obviously belongs to this type. Yes, Uriva calmed down and nodded seriously. Yes, it is a large-scale steel needle magnetic traction attack. First, lay out a large number of steel needles, and then use the steel needles to draw and attack the opponent at any time. Then it's easy to handle. The nine-tailed fox smiled slightly. What you need is to deal with how to avoid such rapid and large-scale range attacks, and how to find a chance to survive from the raindrops. Then what should we do? Uriwa asked seriously. How to do it? The nine-tailed fox raised the gun in his hand with a strange smile. Seeing the pistol in her hand, the Uriva brothers and sisters suddenly thought of an unpleasant possibility. Could it be? Their expressions changed slightly. Boom! Gunshots were fired. Sure enough, the two of them were so frightened that they lost their souls. No wonder they are required to wear body armor and shoot with powerful pistols in a secret room surrounded by highly resilient metal walls. This is simply murder. Hey, you guessed it right, the nine-tailed fox showed its little fangs and said with a smile, it's a pity that there is no prize. Dang 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 dang. The ricochet kept ejecting in the secret room, and the speed trajectory could not be seen clearly at all. All one could hear was the continuous sound after the continuous ejection, and the golden sparks that kept sputtering on the wall and the ground. The two Uriva brothers squatted down with their heads in their hands, lying directly on the ground, not daring to move at all. His face was so scared that he was deformed. Dang! A ricochet hit the ground less than half a meter away from them. Ah! The two screamed in fright, their faces turned pale, and they hugged each other tightly. Garen stood aside and looked at the two people in the field speechlessly. Originally I was a little jealous of that kid. It took me a long time to realize that the realm was actually equaled by this guy using his messy abilities. Looking back now, he shook his head and exhaled helplessly. Kong Xingxiu also turned pale, and stood behind Garen, trying to get him to block her. The ricochet thing doesn't matter whether you are the target or not, whoever the ricochet hits will be unlucky. You perverts don't know how to warn me before starting a fight. Are you scared? Garen looked at her funny. No. Kong Xingxiu said hard. Suddenly, he saw Garen's expression change and he looked at the wall behind him. Careful! He yelled. Ah! Kong Xingxiu threw herself into Garen's arms and screamed. Ha ha ha, then Garen laughed triumphantly. She knew immediately that she had been tricked. You, she quickly broke away and wanted to curse. Laugh. Suddenly a silver light appeared between the two bodies. Garen put away the longsword as if nothing had happened and slowly sheathed it. A black bullet that was cut into two pieces slowly landed at the foot between the two people. Makes a jingling sound. Kong Xingxiu was completely frightened. At that moment of chill, when she saw the silver light flashing, she almost thought that Garen was really going to attack her. The oppressive feeling that could not be ignored was almost unforgettable for her. Good sword skills. The sound of applause from the nine-tailed fox came not far away. But our Shue seems to be frightened, she joked. You're so scared. In fact, Kong Xingxiu has never experienced the complicated and dangerous fighting world in several worlds, and has come all the way peacefully. Although he knew the nine-tailed foxes before and knew that they were different from him, he didn't have too much knowledge about them. She didn't care much, but this time it was different. After experiencing the knife personally, she suddenly felt fear. Headquarters Chief. Are you sure you are really a human? Yureva stood up and said in disbelief. Yuri-ji nodded vigorously on the side. If you hadn't seen it with your own eyes, it would have been hard to imagine that humans could actually kill bullets with cold weapons. Even if the ricochet bounces several times, its speed and power will be greatly reduced, but it is not something that ordinary people can capture the trajectory of. Garen smiled. If you think about it carefully, in fact, after the bullet ricochet jumps, it is no longer as difficult to see as it was originally. Yes, the nine-tailed fox clapped. Now, you two are shooting at me with guns. Don't worry. The bullets here are all special bullets that I changed. Even if you hit someone, they won't kill you immediately. At most, they will cause such a big wound, Bien said. She made a fist-sized circle with her hand. You call this a special bullet? What's the difference between this and an explosive bullet? Yurevar's hair stood on end. No, this is obviously out of the category of bullets, right? This is called a cannonball. I'm sure it's not a cannonball. The nine-tailed fox seemed to guess what he wanted to say. So, in order to survive and protect your sister, young man, use your strongest instinct, she gave a thumbs up. Come on. Come on, sister, Yurewa wanted to yell, but it was obvious that the nine-tailed fox would not give him this chance anymore, so he raised his hand and shot into the sky. Boom. The bullets ricocheted again. Bang 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 bang. This time there was more than one shot. The nine-tailed fox seemed to know that the two men were unwilling to shoot, so he fired 6 shots in a row, emptying all the bullets in the chamber and throwing away the pistol. Tisk tisk tisk. 4 consecutive ricochet bullets bounced back towards her at the same time. A white ribbon suddenly appeared in her hand, and the nine-tailed fox turned around easily and easily avoided Ricochet's attack. Like a dancing acrobatic on the tip of a knife, the white streamers fly gently, as if she is actually dancing a beautiful dance. Yurewa and the two were dumbfounded. Garen watched the movements of the nine-tailed fox closely. Amazing. Her instantaneous speed has obviously exceeded the scope of human beings. I heard her talk about it. It seems that although she can no longer use magic, the big monster's physique still has some things that are far beyond ordinary people, such as this speed, Kong Xingxiu whispered. After Garen's previous blow, she had stabilized her mood. Although she was still nervous, she was not as scared as she was at the beginning. Really, Garen thought thoughtfully. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 1179. Laugh. A special bullet passed by the nine-tailed fox's ear. The trajectory of the bullet seemed to slow down in an instant, grazing her hair and flying lightly. Tisk tisk tisk. In an instant, everything accelerated, and several ricocheting bullets bounced past her side in an instant, but they did not touch her body, clothes, or even her hair ribbon at all. Shoot! The nine-tailed fox suddenly smiled brightly and shouted sharply at the Yureva brothers and sisters. Ah! Urawa and Urawa were startled, and their finger on the trigger couldn't help but pull it. Bang bang bang. Ah! There is no insurance. The two brothers and sister were shocked by the huge recoil and turned pale, but the most important thing was that the gun could be fired just like that. There's not even a fuse to turn on or off. Bullets were flying everywhere, this time it was really random and irregular, and the danger was greatly increased. Even Garen on the side looked serious. It's really random. This kind of special gun will be in trouble if it is pointed at someone. Kong Xingxiu didn't care about face at all this time, hiding tightly behind him and shrinking her whole body. Snapped. Suddenly the nine-tailed fox lightly snapped his fingers. There was a mysterious smile on his face. Open. Buzz. Suddenly, the wall behind her shook violently, and a huge magnetic force appeared out of thin air. Dang! A bullet was first attracted to it. But more bullets that were still ejecting drew curved trajectories, and they all flew towards the direction of the nine-tailed fox. Kuabai. The nine-tailed fox's body was covered with white streamers that suddenly shot out in all directions. Swish, swish, 9 white streamers instantly unfolded like 9 tails like real foxes, turning and trembling rapidly. It unfolded in an instant, like a peacock spreading its tail. In this instant reaction, the nine-tailed fox took a step forward and rushed directly towards the flying bullets. See clearly. The white shadow flashed, and she bent down slightly and squatted down, landing on the ground not far away. The white streamer behind her was instantly recovered and hidden. All movement and sound disappeared, leaving only her kneeling down on one knee quietly. Where's the bullet? Urava hugged his sister and was so frightened that he became weak. When he heard everything quieted down, he immediately relaxed a little and looked at the nine-tailed fox. At that moment, he really couldn't bear to look at it. He would rather never come across such a rare image of such a beautiful little girl being shot in the head. It was too cruel. Simply close your eyes. Uh-huh. The nine-tailed fox stood up with a slight smile on his face. Stretching out her hand, 9 bullets of different sizes suddenly fell out of her palm. Some of the bullets had broken into several pieces, but she caught them all. Do you see clearly? The nine-tailed fox turned its palm downwards, letting the bullets clink on the ground. Urava swallowed, not understanding what just happened. Uriji raised her buried head from his arms and was confused when she heard that there was no sound around her. Although she was confused, she still breathed a sigh of relief. It's unclear what happened. Only Garen, who was standing aside, applauded slightly after watching the whole process. The crisp applause sounded very clear in the small space. The powerful ribbon technique. What's even more powerful is the dodge ability he praised. This level of dodge ability has surpassed that of ordinary humans. The nine-tailed fox's dodge speed has obviously far exceeded that of ordinary people. It is obviously directly improved by using some special means. Just like him, such an ability that does not belong to ordinary people must pay a more troublesome price. Garen himself has soul ring and soul power, and the nine-tailed fox may have similar means. After all, the other party is a 1,000-year-old monster, and no one can tell how many worlds he has experienced and what experiences he has experienced. Time passed slowly, and soon several hours passed. The nine-tailed fox had already taken out more than a dozen pistols and fired bullets continuously, and the ground was littered with bullet casings. The brother and sister Urawa were passed by bullets many times. They were so frightened that they were sweating profusely. Their faces were pale, and they looked almost dehydrated. How's it going? The nine-tailed fox remained the same as before, seemingly not sweating at all. He circled around the two of them lightly. The white ribbon was swinging in his hand, just like a child playing with a toy. It was completely different from the scary guy who could dodge bullets continuously before. How on earth did you hide? Urava looked at the figure of the nine-tailed fox carefully, completely clueless, Sweat slipped from his forehead again and flowed into his eyes. He quickly reached out to wipe it, and then as soon as I opened my eyes, the pretty face of the nine-tailed fox was actually very close, and the tips of their noses were almost only 1 finger apart. He was so frightened that his whole body trembled. Aha! The nine-tailed fox jumped back and jumped several meters as light as a deer. It seems that we haven't understood anything yet, so let's keep going. Axu, please go and get the magazines for us. They are piled on the ground in the passage outside the door. Okay. Okay, Kong Xingxiu hurriedly ran out through the opened passage. Staying here was not just a smell of gunpowder, but could also be life-threatening at any time. It was simply not a place for people to stay. She had been eager to leave for a long time, and now she had the chance. Garen carried the knife and walked to the wall to rest. Looking at the figure of the nine-tailed fox, her dodge and move just now kept replaying in his mind. A very weird dodge ability, not at the human level. It must have been forcibly improved with some special ability. The movement speed is faster than me. My instant shooting speed is faster than hers, but my dodge ability and movement speed are not as good as hers. After comparing himself, he felt that he and the nine-tailed fox had their own strengths. Next, there was a nine-tailed fox holding a gun and shooting at Urawa without any hesitation. Every time, it shot through Urawa's clothes and hair and other extremely dangerous places. Urawa was so frightened that she didn't dare to move at all. The day's training ended quickly. The ground was littered with shell casings and bullet fragments. It was densely spread over a large area. It was getting late, and the secret room was gradually getting darker. The only high-strength bulletproof glass window at the top gradually lost its sunlight, and the entire secret room gradually fell into darkness. The first day of bullet avoidance training ended. Urawa felt that he had gained nothing, and his heart was almost scared out of his mind. Uraja was even frightened to the point of nervous breakdown. When she got to the unified resting bed in the base, she fell down and fell asleep without even wanting to take a shower. There was a large bathroom specifically for bathing in the base, but it was occupied by Nine-Tailed Fox and Kong Xingxiu. Garen lay on his back on the bed, and his keen ears could clearly hear the sound of the two girls playing and jumping. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Come in. Garen knew who it was without having to guess. The door is unlocked. After a delay, the door opened with a click. Urawa walked in. There was a strong smell of medicine on his body, and he had obviously applied a lot of various ointments. There is a band-aid on the nose, which is the mark left by a stray bullet that scratched the bridge of the nose during the day. Brother Deo. Sit. Garen did not get up and continued to lie on his back on the bed. The only chair in the room was just big enough for Urawa to sit on. I came here to ask you about what happened during the day, Urawa said directly. During the day, Garen said non-committally, didn't you already train for a day? Why haven't you gained anything yet? You saw it. Urawa smiled bitterly. Nothing gained at all. I have tried my best to see the trajectory clearly, but it's still useless. If Sister Nine-Tailed Fox hadn't hit the vital part, I don't know how many times I would have died. He sat down on the chair and sighed deeply, feeling very melancholy. Garen didn't even bother to move. You will know if you have gained anything by trying it. Try. Urawa was slightly stunned, not knowing how to try. Clang. Suddenly, a silvery cold light struck towards his neck, drawing an arc in the dark room. The hair stood on end, and Urawa immediately fell back without even thinking, watching as the blade slashed across less than a centimeter above his forehead, cutting a strand of hair into 2 pieces. You have good skills, young man. Garen slowly put away his sword. Lie back on the bed again. Only Urawa was lying on the ground blankly. He lay down on his back to avoid the knife just now, but now even the cold ground could not conceal the surprise in his heart. I actually dodged it? Brother Deo, did you keep your hand? He reacted immediately, got up, and asked loudly. No, Garen yawned. Same as when I dealt with you before. This is my normal knife speed. Urawa's expression was very strange. Surprise, pain, and struggle were all displayed in a short time on one face. Real. Real. Galen simply closed his eyes and said lazily. After Urawa stood still for a moment, he decisively bowed to Garen, turned around and hurried out. The whole person's energy were completely different in an instant. If what Garen said was true and he didn't hold anything back. So from the beginning, he was barely able to catch Garen's sword, to now being able to dodge a sword when attacked from the front, the improvement is no longer obvious. After listening to Urawa running out overjoyed, Garen lay on his back on the bed and then opened his eyes. The result of my hard work for so long. This guy caught up with me in just a few days. Should I say that I really deserve to be the protagonist? His eyes were complicated. Anyone who sees a person catching up with his years of achievements in just a few days will feel uncomfortable. This is a trace of jealousy, a trace of the unworthiness of working hard for oneself for so long. The next day, the training was the same as the previous day, except that Urawa played alone and Uraja watched. Obviously only Urawa could handle this difficult avoidance training, so Uraja, who had no special abilities, was relaxed. The nine-tailed fox changed his strategy this time. The upper and lower metal walls are constantly exchanging to release huge magnetic force. Boom! Countless shells and bullets on the ground all flew into the sky. Extremely fast. Urawa's body stood in the middle. Wind from all directions, he roared, and 4 white sword lights appeared around his body. Amidst the clanging sound of impact, he knocked out a large number of shells and bullets. But there were still many bullet fragments that penetrated the defensive net and hit him. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 1180. Boom. The lever was attracted to countless bullet casings that clung to the wall, and suddenly fell from the sky and hit him hard. Wind from above, Urawa once again used sword skills to defend. Garen watched from the side, yawning from time to time. This training had been going on for several hours. Once the defense failed, Urawa would suffer cruel punishment and run naked. The bullet fragments pulled by these huge magnetic forces have sharp edges and corners. Under high-speed force, they can easily scratch Urawa's clothes. Especially when shooting from the bottom up, the pants on the lower body can often be heard tearing. Cracking sound. The nine-tailed fox smiled coquettishly as if watching a show, and kept turning the magnetic switch on and off. It seemed that she cared more about fun than training, so Urawa was unlucky to meet her as a coach. Finally, this training has come to an end. Urawa's progress has been rapid. From the beginning, he ran naked again and again, but now it doesn't matter at all. His evasion ability has also gone from being awkward at the beginning, to now only a few fragments can escape his defense. Hydra, Urawa suddenly shouted. His skin turned purple again, his muscles swelled, and his body became thicker. He actually activated the power of the Savior and the power of the Hydra at the same time. Wind from all directions, he held a knife in both hands, and 4 sword lights almost rose from his side one after another, instantly blocking a large number of bullet fragments from the bottom up again. Almost the nine-tailed fox clapped his hands and stopped manipulating the magnetism. Come over here. If you encounter that opponent again, your current situation should be able to keep up with his shooting speed and similar large-scale intensive long-range shooting. I feel the same. Urawa nodded heavily. Thank you for your guidance. From the past few days of getting along with him, he already knew that the nine-tailed fox was not as young as it seemed, and gradually began to use the honorific title instead of the previous one. Of randomness. Next, You should do what you should do. Garen stood up and approached. What should be done? Yureva smiled bitterly, not knowing how to answer. He just wanted to find his mother, but after meeting Garuda and learning a series of circumstances, he was no longer very worried about his mother's whereabouts. The only thing he was worried about was when the guy who claimed to be the root Dr. Giottai would show up. Come and trouble him. The vulture is too powerful. So much so that he was a little breathless. But they let him go more than once, and they didn't intend to kill him despite their absolute advantage. Obviously there was an unknown reason. Brother, the vulture guy depends entirely on you. Urija walked over and whispered. After seeing the training these days, she also tried to keep up with her brother's progress, but unfortunately, she did not have any special abilities and could not keep up with this explosive and terrifying progress. I can only stand back and watch. Don't worry. Confidence filled Uriva's heart again. There's no way he can win against me. He clenched his fists. Garen and the nine-tailed fox Kong Xingxiu were helpless on the side. Garen's joking fighting philosophy had been deeply remembered by Uriva. Next, we really have to see whether the original plot will continue to advance. After the special training, everything returned to normal life. The Uriva brothers and sisters stayed in Siuzulai city and never left again. Garen and Kong Xingxiu also returned home from their travel, had dinner with the time travelers again, and began to discuss the plot trends that have emerged so far. Garen also learned information about the four cornerstones from these people: Savior, Mind Reader, Dreamer, Killer. The four protagonists, who are constantly reincarnated, will naturally experience intertwined lives, either confrontation or alliance, every time. There seems to be some kind of magnetic force between them that will pull each other together. A group of people were discussing the next response plan in Juwiahu's beachside villa. So, until now, the other three cornerstones have not appeared, and the only one who can be confirmed is the Savior Uriva, the policewoman Rika asked. She has always had a quick temper, and is good at close combat martial arts such as grappling. She is considered a master compared to ordinary people, but compared to a vulture, her strength is about the same as a silver chain. Even worse. But her strongest skill is not fighting, but marksmanship. It is said that it is not ordinary terrifying. Where's Yang He? What do you think? The worker uncle looked at the nine-tailed fox. Garen sat aside, and this was the first time he heard someone call the nine-tailed fox Yang He. It seemed that this was another official name for her. It's very simple, the nine-tailed fox said with a smile, we just need to help the Savior, right? Lend our power to him. The stronger he is, the safer we are. If you get involved directly like this, many people who lend their support to the Saviors will die even in the original plot. Is this really good? The red-haired eldest lady Yuan Xing frowned. In her previous life, she was an uncle with mature thoughts and the uncle's calmness and kindness. The combination of the background of the eldest lady and the beautiful girl gives people a strange sense of contradiction. How about I arrange for everyone to go to other countries to avoid disaster? Her family has strong financial resources and is ranked among the top 100 in the world, so arranging this is naturally a trivial matter. What should I do with my pigs? Z1, a beautiful girl with long black hair, pouted, I just invested 300 million yuan in a new breeding farm. I only know pigs. Can you have other things besides pigs in your mind? Yuan Xing slapped her in the face. But. No buts. I'll just accompany you after you're such a pig, Yuan Xing said unhappily. The problem now is to first determine when the other four cornerstones will arrive. Although we time travelers are not within the control of the four cornerstones and will not be controlled by mind reading and dreams, on the other hand, such characteristics it will also specifically arouse their vigilance and attention, the nine-tailed fox said calmly. Everyone, tell me, what can you contribute? I'll take care of the expenses. Yuan Xingke waved his hand grandly. At least 50 billion budget. I will take care of the arms aspect. We can provide an emergency response special force of about 200 people. They are all retired elites from various countries. It will be no problem to deal with a few masters like Tyrannosaurus, the nine-tailed fox said confidently. I will be responsible for the logistics of biochemical drugs, Pan Pan said, and he smiled when he saw Jia Long's uninformed look. Although I am a chef, I have been studying biochemistry and pharmacology for a lifetime in my previous life, and I am a top academician specially appointed by the country. After all, I have lived several lifetimes, so I can't be justified if I don't have some skills. I am responsible for intelligence, Kong Xingxiu said confidently. I can solve all possible intelligence on the network, as well as attack and defense. It's up to you to fight head-on. Yang He and Liwa Yuanxing looked at the nine-tailed fox and the policewoman Liwa. I have no problem. Leave the long-range aspect to me. The close combat depends on Yang He, Liwa said solemnly. Then she turned her attention to Garen. Speaking of which, Garen's strength is pretty good and can handle the vulture's mid-level cotters. We need a base for our logistics. When the time comes, it will all depend on you for defense and early warning. In their eyes, although Garen was very strong, it was only for ordinary people, and was unable to deal with the world's truly top masters. Only the nine-tailed fox and Liwa could handle this level of confrontation, and Liwa could only serve as a support. Only the nine-tailed fox who is truly serious is the most powerful being among the time travelers. Once the killer appears, Yang He, it will all depend on you, Liwa solemnly said to the nine-tailed fox again. Don't worry, Kuabai's face became solemn. When the time comes, I will free him. There's no problem with me. Garen didn't show off. After all, he didn't know how powerful the world's top combat powers like the Slaughterer were, and judging from Kuabai's tone, it seemed that she had a more powerful trump card that she had been hiding. State. Of all the time travelers present, if you carefully distinguish them, you can tell that the Nine-Tails is the strongest one supporting this place. With her supporting him from the front, everyone else could breathe a sigh of relief. Except for me. If the Slaughterer really appears and wants to deal with us, aren't there still magic lanterns and Poseidons in front of us? With these two powerful beings blocking the front, we can feel more at ease, the nine-tailed fox whispered. It would be best if they could take action, but I contacted friends from the other two continents a few days ago. Yuanxing smiled bitterly. The magic lantern has gone to other worlds to complete its mission, and there is no chance of coming back for another 3 to 5 years. Poseidon is missing, and if he goes to other worlds, it will be really troublesome. Magic Lantern Sea God, this was the first time Garen heard these two names. Well, they are two of the best strong men in the world, Kong Xingxiu explained to Garen in a low voice. Magic Lantern is now the vice president of the Slan Kingdom and the head of the military headquarters. He has control over the country's military. If he can mobilize the army to encircle and suppress him, the natural killer may be dragged to death no matter how strong he is. He can only be reincarnated. Bull, Garen nodded. This planet was much larger than the previous planets he had experienced. To be able to get to this point in such a highly restrictive world, I have to say that it is really awesome. What about Poseidon? The top master of the Manatee tribe. He is not a human being, but a giant species that lives in deep-sea trenches. His body is incredibly tough, and his body is several thousand meters long, about the same size as a small island. His tail can easily overturn a 1,000,000-ton ship. After it was reincarnated as a manatee in this life, he practiced martial arts like crazy. In addition, he had been reincarnated in the world of immortals before, so now he has almost become the overlord of the entire ocean. Kong Xingxiu briefly introduced. It's not a human being. Tisk tisk, Garen had lost his determination to win this time. There was such a giant creature, and it goes without saying that his current small body could easily be overcome by a sneeze. I originally thought that I had developed quickly enough in my life, but I didn't expect that there would be something even more perverted. To be able to exercise to this extent in this kind of world is indeed a pervert. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 1181. Then I'll just focus on following up with Yureva. The friendship of the saviors needs to be maintained forever, Garen said. That's good. You and Yureva have a natural master-disciple relationship. You can just take advantage of this, the nine-tailed fox agreed. However, I always feel that something is wrong. I have always felt this way since the changes in the plot last time. You have one too, Liwa frowned. The same goes for me. When I was tracking down the Vulture's deployment personnel, I had a fight with two long-distance gunmen. At that time, I felt that the situation seemed to be somewhat derailed from the original plot. At this time, the Vulture's main focus should not be on the savior. On your body. We should investigate. The nine-tailed fox now looked like a real big shot, instead of the naughty and cute ordinary little girl before. Garen sat in the corner, watching everyone discuss various possibilities, but his mind drifted to other places. I'll go out and wash up. He felt a little bored and whispered to Kong Xingxiu. The latter was discussing with Yuan Xing about arranging personnel. Hearing this, he nodded slightly to show that he understood. Garen stood up and left the room, closing the door gently. The door is absolutely soundproof, and there are two bodyguards in black police uniforms standing guard not far outside. They glanced this way and then quickly looked away. Garen walked to the bathroom on the thick black carpet, stood in front of the gold-framed mirror, and looked at himself. What he saw in the mirror was Kong Xiaofei's body, with short red hair, a firm and delicate face, a strong figure, a strong back and a strong waist, and his chest muscles almost bulged out from the white shirt on his upper body. Turn on the faucet and hot water flows out quickly. Rushing into the sink below. Garen took a handful of water and rubbed it vigorously on his face. He took a few deep breaths and felt much better. The engines and whistles of ships at sea can still be faintly heard outside. There were also people laughing and playing, making it a lively scene. It's not an option to stay in this world all the time. It's better to do some tasks to earn some contribution points and go to the lighthouse headquarters. This thought came to Garen's mind. This world has basically been determined to be between the four cornerstones. The fight is mixed with huge organizations like Vultures, but it should be safe and not dangerous away from this center. As for the reason why Liwa and others found a far-fetched reason to join the plot, I am afraid that only they know the real purpose best. Nothing more than one is to contribute points, and the other is to get benefits from this. After all, the four cornerstones are the most mysterious existences in this world. In this world with extremely strict rules, they can still possess extraordinary power. If we can figure out the reason and master this principle, then we can defeat most of them. The world will be able to achieve the lowest level of force in this world. Some people here may have been involved and had to take the initiative, such as Yuan Xing and Kong Xingxiu, and Pan Pan. And some people may be just for profit, such as the Liwa nine-tailed fox. Garen probably understood the situation here. He decided to get involved because of the fluctuation in his soul power. This invested identity is almost one of the centers of the whirlpool. In the later stage, Kong Xingxiu was basically Athena, who was constantly kidnapped in the plot. The mind reader's unexpected crush on Nobuyuki Kamikura is the most crucial part of the original plot. I'm afraid I can't join in just because I'm bored now. Garen smiled bitterly and turned off the faucet. Raising his head, he looked carefully at his face in the mirror. Suddenly, a dark figure walked through the corridor outside the door behind him. Garen frowned slightly and saw from the reflection in the mirror that it was a short figure, which seemed to be a female girl. Because he was going very fast and his attention was not there, he couldn't see clearly. Turning around, he looked at the empty corridor door. My sense of hearing and touch shouldn't have deteriorated to this point, right? He felt a little confused about his other two sensory abilities besides vision. With his sword master level perception, it was absolutely impossible to ignore anyone's approach. He recalled the dark figure just now. It seemed to be a little girl in shabby clothes, with long hair and ragged clothes. The rest is really blurry. Are there other time travelers? There are guards here, and there are people guarding the front, rear, left and right. It's impossible for people to come in casually. Garen intuitively felt something mysterious. Go out and stand on the golden corridor. You can see guards at the ends of the corridors on the left and right, guarding their duties loyally. After frowning and finding nothing, Garen went back to the bathroom to dry his hands with the dryer, and then returned to the room where the problem was discussed. Seagulls sailed across the blue sea, making sharp and clear calls. Mixed with the sound of the waves, it gives people a refreshing feeling. The sun shines on the sea during the day, and standing on the golden beach leaning at an angle, you can also see the golden light on the sea. You are so rich. Urivar took his sister and walked on the beach. He passed by the parasols one after another. The beautiful women lying half naked and sunbathing under them made his eyes go straight. Brother, don't be embarrassed, okay? Yurigi couldn't help but pinch him hard. Both of them were wearing orange swimsuits. She was in a three-point style, but her figure was obviously completely suppressed by most of the beauties on the beach. Seeing how Uriwa's eyes were constantly drifting to other beauties, she suddenly felt jealous. What's the shame? Uriva now has a true saying that when others are inferior, he is invincible. There is no psychological pressure at all to look at him more. I don't think this just caters to their original intention of dressing up. Think about it, if those beauties have worked hard to dress up for a long time, and everyone admires them after they come out, then no one will know the effect of their dressing up. You should stay hidden if you want to see it. It's so embarrassing, Yurigi complained softly with her cheeks slightly red. What does it mean to be embarrassed? Uriwa raised his finger and shook it. Zyja, it seems you haven't truly understood the essence of Brother Deo. Essence? Urija immediately became serious as soon as she mentioned Galleon. What essence? Remember what Brother Deo said, if you want to win, you must use some secret techniques to catch the enemy off guard in an unexpected way, shock the opponent, and make it unable to react. Only then can you succeed. Uriva was slightly proud. Tao began to talk about his feelings. So I realized a truth from it. What's the point? That's it. Just as Uriva was about to tell his true meaning about the sword master, his eyes suddenly froze and he stared at a cruise ship on the sea in front of him. The white cruise ship was heading straight and quickly towards the two of them, and two people could be seen standing far away on the bow. One of them had his hands on his chest and was tall. He was wearing a doctor's white coat over his suit. He was being blown back by the sea breeze and looked a bit nondescript. It came so fast Uriwa looked nervous. What? Urija turned around and saw the two people on the cruise ship. The other person was directly ignored by the two, and their attention was completely focused on the route Dr. Giatai. From a distance, Dr. Gen Z stretched out his hand and waved slightly towards the two of them, actually smiling and saying hello. Can't be here. There are too many people here. Innocent people will be hurt. Uriva looked around, recalling the tragic scene last time where the corpses of police officers were everywhere, and he couldn't help but feel a hint of gloom in his heart. He was deeply impressed by the vulture's unscrupulousness. Zyja, you go find Brother Deo, and at the same time call Garuda and tell him the situation here. I'll handle it from Dr. Gen Z's side, Uriwa said decisively. No, Urija looked nervous, I want to go with you. Be obedient, she was interrupted immediately. Uriwa's expression was solemn as never before. Don't worry, I have done such miserable special training just for this day. Brother, Urija said worriedly. Go quickly. Uriva pushed her sister hard and ran towards the deserted beach in the distance. Urija gritted her teeth, having already said this, she had to find Garen and others as soon as possible in order to rush over and rescue her brother in time. She got up and ran quickly towards the nine-tailed fox villa on the beach. What? Dr. Gen Z is here. Garen stood up in surprise and looked at the panting Yuri-G in front of him. The nine-tailed fox and others were still discussing the details in the room inside. He was leaning outside the door to breathe. When he was bored, he saw Yuri-G, who had been invited to play together, running over. Such breaking news came out of my mouth. Yureva went alone. He raised two long knives and asked in a solemn voice. Well, my brother said it's okay for him to be alone, but I'm still worried. Yurija's face was full of anxiety. Lead the way. Garen didn't say anything. The saviors may not have truly grown up yet. If the vultures people accidentally get out of their minds and kill them, all their efforts will be in vain. The reincarnation characteristics of the four cornerstones are: once you die and are reincarnated, your memory will be washed away and you will not remember who you were before. Therefore, the only way to ensure the relationship with the Savior is to ensure that Urivar does not die. The two quickly left the villa. On the way, Garen notified Nine-Tailed Fox and others on his mobile phone. They also came quickly. Soon, there was a faint sound of gold and iron coming from the distance. Garen and the other two didn't hesitate at all and ran directly towards the source of the sound. The area where the battle is taking place is gradually getting closer. Puff! In an instant, a wave of sand rose up from the beach in front of Garen, blocking the way forward of Garen and Yuri-G. The two stopped immediately and stretched out their hands to block the sand waves to prevent sand from getting into their eyes. After the sound of sand falling, a one-eyed man in navy blue military uniform appeared in front of the two of them. The man had an expressionless face, short silver hair, and white gloves on his hands, which reflected a dazzling white color in the midday sun. Vulture number 7, Silver Capital. He lowered his head slightly, as if it was a courtesy to his opponent. Get out of the way or die. Garen held the hilt of his sword and his face darkened. Death. Yinda raised the corners of his mouth slightly, revealing a hint of sarcasm. You can try. Zi. Garen dodged forward and left a long mark on the beach with his solace. The blade appeared in his hand like a blink of an eye, and he slashed horizontally. Aha! The bright silver arc flew towards Yindu's neck in an instant. The breeze brought by the blade blew Yindu's short hair on the temples. He suddenly raised his hand and grabbed the blade straight. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 1182. When Uriva raised a metal stool and barely deflected the steel needle from the root of the tree that was flying towards him. He himself was rolling around in a mess, jumping and running around like a monkey on the beach. The transplanted doctor just stood there and moved his fingers a few times. His expression was extremely relaxed. It seems that you are a little more flexible than last time. He yawned out of boredom. But it's still weak. That's because I haven't used my true skills yet, Uriva yelled while avoiding the almost invisible steel needle. What conspiracy do you have? I have no grievances with you. Why are you looking for me specifically? Conspiracy. Dr. Gen Z Giottai lighted a cigarette for himself easily, inhaled, and then blew out the smoke ring. The white smoke ring could hardly be seen in the scorching sun. I have no interest in explaining the reasons for a person who is about to die. Instead of having this time to talk, it is better to solve the problem as soon as possible and go back to drink milk. I heard that milk can strengthen the chest muscles, and my chest muscles have been sagging a bit recently. Chest muscles? Are you sure it's not breast enlargement? Uriva couldn't laugh or cry. When he wanted to speak, he suddenly did a backflip to avoid a row of straight-shaped steel needles. A row of steel needles accurately hit the spot where he was standing before, making the sand squeak. Okay, Giottai looked around. That's almost it? It's time to wrap up. Just like last time, he slowly stretched out his right hand and pointed it in the direction of Uriwa. It's this move again. Uriva's whole body suddenly felt horrified. Brother! Take the knife, Suddenly a voice came from afar. Yureva turned his head and saw a long object spinning towards him. "It's my sister. She came and brought her commonly used knife." His roller coaster of emotions, which were almost despairing, were filled with hope. He quickly swooped towards the direction from which the knife flew. Whole Giotai's hand finally slowly tightened at this moment. Buzz. The depths of countless sandy beaches began to vibrate. Boom. In an instant, countless fine sands splashed up, and a large number of densely packed fine needles rose into the sky, all flying towards Urawa in the middle. "It's over," Giotai said calmly. Wind from all directions. Almost at the same time, 4 bright golden lights rolled and lit up in mid-air. Countless hair-like needles were instantly blocked by the golden light, then bent and broken, then shot out again in all directions. Laugh. A flying broken needle grazed Giotai's cheek, causing a bloody opening. He froze. Completely stunned. At this moment, his mood was as complicated as Garen's before. Anyone who sees the results of his hard work for many years being cracked by a brat in just a dozen days or so will feel such complex emotions that ordinary people cannot understand. It was a mixture of jealousy and sadness. When the man told him, he didn't believe it at all, so he took action personally to prove him wrong. And now Giotai reached out and gently touched the wound on his face, and his fingers were stained with oozing blood. It's real blood. Blood dripped on the beach drop by drop, dyeing the originally golden gravel red. Garen held the knife in one hand and looked quietly at the figure a few meters away. "You still won't give way." The gloves that were comparable to gold and iron on Yindu's hands were still intact, but the gloves that were supposed to be used to block weapons were used to cover his lips. Blood dripped from his fingers bit by bit. Ahem. He coughed violently several times. Think back to the scene just now. He really caught the knife without missing a beat. The blade did not cut through the glove, nor did it touch any other part of myself. Why? Why? Yindu didn't expect that he would be severely injured in the first fight. He is the 7th number of the vultures, the 7th man who stands above the tens of thousands of armed forces that are elite enough in the world. Do you think I'm going to explain to you the secrets of my tricks like those stupid villains? Save it, Garen said impatiently. Okay, be obedient, be good, and get out of the way, I'm in a hurry. You want to humiliate me? Yindu stood up straight, or do you think you will win? Isn't it? Garen asked, pointing the tip of his knife diagonally at the ground. Suddenly he caught a glimpse of a sneer at the corner of the other party's mouth, and suddenly felt bad. Boom. A ball of intense fire instantly flooded Garen's location. It's a bomb. The explosion instantly blasted a ball of red fire on the beach. The huge impact rushed out in all directions, rolling up scorching hot air. In the firelight, the hot air and smoke suddenly dispersed. There was a clear sound. A golden sword light split the flame into two, like a golden crescent, slashing straight towards Yindu. Boom. Another violent explosion exploded directly between Daoguang and Yindu. The sky-high gravel, accompanied by the huge impact of the explosion, directly turned the sand into countless hidden weapons, hitting Daoguang hard, directly knocking the trajectory skewed. Snort. Garen snorted coldly. The body was still rolling in mid-air, and was shaken by the impact of the huge explosion, making the sword movement inaccurate. He simply raised the sword light. Whirring. His whole body, including his sword, actually started to spin like a wheel, forming a huge golden wheel and continuing to rush towards Yindu. Yindu's expression changed and he retreated quickly. After getting close to the battle for the first time, he knew that fighting a sword master like Garen in close combat was undoubtedly the stupidest thing to do, so that he didn't even take advantage of his strongest advantage: being hit hard. However, he will not make the same mistake twice. Super Micro. He reached out and casually grabbed it in his pocket and threw it out suddenly. Countless bomb particles as tiny as spores quickly enveloped Galleon. In an instant, hundreds of ultra-miniature bombs covered Galleon in a hemispherical shape. At this moment, Garen's figure suddenly flew sideways from mid-air and stabbed diagonally into the beach not far away. Bang 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 bang. Continuous ultra-miniature bombs exploded, countless small flames blocked Yindu's sight, and a bad premonition suddenly surged in his heart. He turned around and was about to move away. Just when he turned around, he saw a silver-white blade hanging straight on his neck. It's a pity. Garen's face emerged from behind the blade. You lose. From the beginning to the end, he only held the knife with one hand, and it remains the same until now. Yindu raised his head slightly, sweat dripping from his forehead, but he didn't dare to reach out to wipe it away. As an agility master, he was treated like a monkey by his opponent. He was restrained without even being able to show off his strongest point. This was undoubtedly the greatest irony for him. How did you do it? He asked solemnly. How did you do it? Garen was speechless. You, a blaster, came to compete with me in close combat. It would be really ironic if I, as a sword master, could still lose to you. I know the most important core of swordsmanship. What is it? Fast. Cruel. Accurate. My shooting speed is enough to shoot 7 times in 1 second. You can't be faster than me, Yindu said, losing his cool. I can do it 16 times a second, Garen said calmly. On a deserted beach. Urawa held knives in both hands and slowly confronted Jiatai, the root doctor. The center of gravity of his whole body sank slightly, and his whole body was like a hunched-up cheetah. His sharp eyes were fixed on Jiatai, and the silver blade in his hand kept adjusting its position and angle slightly. The two circled each other step by step, trying to be the first to find the opponent's loopholes. Both sides are dueling experts with high lethality. As long as a loophole is discovered, the victory or defeat will only be instantaneous. The scorching sunshine fell on the two of them mercilessly. Both Jiatai and Urawa were sweating more and more. Jiatai was sweating more, and their clothes were completely soaked. Urawa's skin, on the other hand, had been peeled off by the sun, sweat flowed through the wound, and there was constant burning pain. Yurigi stood watching the battle from a distance, her whole heart hanging on Urawa, her eyes wide open until she couldn't bear it anymore and had to blink. Good boy, it's been so long since we last met. I'm actually calling you. Jiatai's physical strength was extremely exhausted. He couldn't remember how many years he had not fought such a high-intensity battle. There seemed to be a fire burning in his chest, and the suit and white coat that he had originally used to show off had completely become the most serious drag at this moment, consuming his energy every moment. Sweat flowed from his hair into his eyes, but he didn't dare to wipe it away. This kind of highly concentrated confrontation is what squeezes people's potential and physical strength the most. You are the one who beat me half to death last time. You don't know how to respect the elderly and care for the young at all, Urawa gasped and stared at the other party. Suddenly he spotted a flaw and rushed out. The golden sword light suddenly appeared, and it cut almost close to Jiatai's side. The latter was so frightened that he lost his soul. Dang dang dang. 3 steel needles flew out in succession, forcing Urawa to not pursue, but to defend and block. The two have been intertwined like this for a long time. Once Jiatai used a large area steel needle to explode, Urawa activated the Hydra and Savior abilities at the same time, and the 4 directions wind blocked it perfectly, directly turning the 2 ultimate moves into counter-attack moves. I said, can't you respect the elderly? Jiatai felt like he couldn't hold it anymore. If he continues to consume like this endlessly, he is already a 64-year-old man, and he cannot compare with the little kid in front of him. Why don't you respect my 15-year-old young mind? Urawa felt that the skin on her back was getting more and more painful. My mind was also a little dizzy, and I was probably on the verge of coma due to heat stroke. Giotai's heart was already extremely painful at this time. If I had known earlier, he wouldn't have taken the initiative to take on this task, which would have left him in such a miserable state now. That one at the back is your sister, right? He suddenly said. Try to divert the other person's attention. Looks like I'll have to choose some meaner hands. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 1183. Click. Garen's leather boots dug deeply into the sand of the beach. He stood in the distance and quietly looked at Urawa and Giotai, the root doctor, who were still fighting. Both of them had reached the point of exhaustion. Now as soon as I go up, the battle will be over immediately. Garen felt someone coming behind him and recognized the footsteps of the nine-tailed fox and others, and said casually. Then why don't you come up? The nine-tailed fox and a group of subordinates in black quickly walked from the rear and stood next to Garen, also watching the battle on the beach from a distance. Why do you want to go up there? Hasn't the vulture always had no ill intentions towards us? Garen asked, slowly sheathing the knife in his hand. So I let that guy go. It's just a test. So just let them know how powerful it is, right? The nine-tailed fox stood beside him with his arms folded, seeming to agree with this approach. Garen wasn't quite sure what she was thinking. The nine-tailed fox was so actively involved, so he probably had big intentions. He now knows that even among time travelers, almost no one has abilities like his innate attributes, so the only way they can make themselves stronger in each world is to seize the familiar plot and get the most out of it. Required benefits. Garen didn't know what the others wanted. If it was about soul seeds and soul power like him, I'm afraid there would be a few more people on the final enemy list. At this time, the battle on the beach was basically decided. After Giotai verbally threatened Urawa to no avail, he decisively chose to retreat. A submarine emerged from the sea, carrying him quickly away from the beach here, and soon disappeared on the sea level. Garen and others slowly walked over, and the nine-tailed fox quickly took people there for treatment. This time was the best opportunity to build relationships. The friendship of the savior was one of the biggest advantages in the plot. Garen watched from a distance as the nine-tailed fox led the people there. Liwa and other time travelers did not appear, and Kong Xingxiu did not know where he had gone. I don't know why. Although the level of force in this world is a bit beyond my expectation, there is still no sense of crisis at all. Why is this? He touched his chin, feeling that he seemed to have taken it too easy recently. The nine-tailed fox looked at the Urawa brothers and sisters who were carried away, and Liwa stood beside her at some point. How is it? What's the situation? Liwa asked in a low voice. Something's wrong, the nine-tailed fox frowned. The plot is a bit out of control. It feels like something is very wrong. Is it Urawa's problem? Or is there something wrong with the newcomer Garen? Liwa also frowned. She knew that the nine-tailed fox's premonitions were always very accurate. It doesn't seem to be the case. The nine-tailed fox walked a little further away to prevent being eavesdropped. His long hair was blown up by the sea breeze and ignored it. I always feel like something is not as it should be. But I can't tell what it is. Could it be your imagination? Liwa said casually. No, the nine-tailed fox shook his head. Forget it, let's not think about it. We can only take it one step at a time. We just need to follow Urawa closely. The savior will naturally lead to the main plot. Sooner or later, clues will appear whether it is right or wrong. We just need to be more prepared. Garen was bored and cared about Urawa's injury, and determined that he was just overtired and fell asleep, so he went back to sleep. Now he was completely relaxed. In fact, there was nothing in this world that could really threaten him. Not much. Now with his sword master level strength, he is basically invincible on land, not to mention the higher level of swordsmanship that he has achieved by using his soul ring. The soul power is also nourishing his body all the time. Urawa brother and sister, Kong Xingxiu, nine-tailed fox, and a group of time travelers, these people were all around the plot almost all the time, but he was very leisurely. Since the battle on the beach, Urawa seems to have been stimulated by something, and she has been exercising frantically to strengthen herself every day. The nine-tailed fox Kong Xingxiu stayed together every day and didn't know what to discuss. Garen himself was too lazy to pay attention to this. He would go out to a restaurant every day, eat some side dishes, go out to a hot spring, take a sauna, and occasionally go to class to reminisce about the wonderful school days. Life is so cool. As for money, there is no need to worry about this aspect at all. With his ability, making some money is just a trivial matter. One night, people from the Ministry of National Security came to the door. After discussing with Galen for a night, Galen got what most people would probably get if they worked hard all their lives. The less than 100,000 yuan of wealth is enough for him to spend as he pleases. And all he needs to pay is to take a few shots when needed. He became the so-called chief instructor of the XXX Special Forces, or some other title of chief instructor of the military. As for what kind of army it was, he himself had forgotten it. Anyway, just make yourself live a better life. Of course, the identity of the other party soon came back from the nine-tailed fox. The other party turned out to be from the vulture. The vulture and the Ministry of National Security were basically two sides of the same coin. This made Garen and others puzzled. Why did the vultures massacre a large number of coast guards at sea? This doesn't make sense. But Garen didn't bother to think about these things. Anyway, his mission goal is to stay behind and wait for news from the nine-tailed fox and others. After more than 2 months of living a boring and comfortable life like this, new news finally came. Lying in the large bathtub next to the floor-to-ceiling window, Galen soaked in a milk bath sprinkled with rose petals. He put a towel around his neck and squinted his eyes lazily. The night view of the city is particularly charming. Occasionally, helicopters will fly over, reflecting the traffic and sweeping lights of the city below. Is something going on again? Garen lazily looked at Kong Xingxiu, who was sitting not far away watching TV. How else would you have time to come to my place? Kong Xingxiu held the remote control board and rolled her eyes at him. I randomly changed a few channels and turned on mute. Look at yourself, how do you look like a student now? How long has it been since you went home? Your father almost thought you were missing. It doesn't matter, Garen shrugged, we are just passers-by in this world anyway, and being too nostalgic would be bad for everyone. Kong Xingxiu was speechless, stood up and walked over. The situation has taken a new turn. Urawa has received news that the real strongest vulture people are about to show up. So what? Garen remained unmoved. What do you think? Kong Xingxiu said angrily, I rushed here eagerly to tell you the news. What do you think I did for that? She straightened her hair. Last time, the rooted Dr. Jiatai ranked 6th among the vultures, and there were 5 stronger beings above him. A few days ago, after Urawa learned the news, he planned to set out to find his mother, the former top rewarder. Golden Hunter Guanglu, are you still going? What? Are you ready to go to sea? Garen reluctantly opened one eye and glanced at her. It's good that you know. We don't have enough manpower to fight this time. Are you going or not? Kong Xingxiu said impatiently. Garen did not answer immediately, but turned over and lay on his stomach in the bathtub. Why don't you go straight to the point? Go to the Slayer and kill him first, or build a good relationship with him first and relax. Why do you have to follow the Savior? Kong Xingxiu frowned slightly. What are you thinking? Why do you ask? Isn't the Savior the main line of the plot? If you don't follow him, who will you follow? Do you think you can beat the killer? Otherwise, you can deal with him alone, and we won't have to go to such trouble. Now, everyone does his or her own thing and does whatever he wants. No, I'd better live my own life honestly. I don't want to do such a thankless thing. The four cornerstones can't be killed at all. They will be resurrected in a year. Even if they can be killed, what's his point? Garen said sternly. What I care about is, what is your real purpose? Can you use the four cornerstones and get any benefits from it? He added with a yawn. I don't want to work for nothing. Kong Xingqiu did not answer immediately, but began to think. He seemed to be weighing whether to really tell Garen the truth or not. Garen is not in a hurry. After all, he came to this world to find fluctuations in soul power as a secondary purpose. The main thing is to repair his condition. Being tense all the time does not conform to the law of relaxation. Even if he couldn't get any soul power clues, it didn't matter to him. On the contrary, he was more interested in the lighthouse. In a high-rise hotel with more than 50 floors, the two of them did not speak for a while, just one was thinking and the other was waiting. You know the original plot, right? Kong Xingqiu suddenly said. I know a little bit, but I'm not very familiar with it. Garen nodded. Kong Xingqiu turned around a few times and put her hands behind her back. After carefully sorting out his thoughts, he spoke. The core of the original plot is the story of the vulture helping the savior, supporting him, and fighting against the massacre. Everything revolves around the grudges between the third generation of massacres and Yureva. The first generation of massacres was killed by Yurewa. Reva killed independently. This is the first generation era. After the second generation massacre was resurrected, he began to seek revenge and was killed by Yureva and the vulture together. This is the second generation era. In the third generation era, Massacre the Hunter resurrected again and killed Urija. At this time, the vulture had fallen apart and had internal conflicts. He was unable to help Yureva anymore and could only fight against him alone. At this time, there will be two endings. One is that Yureva is killed. Everyone related to him was killed. The other ending is that he and the massacre died together. Kong Xingqiu briefly introduced. In the entire plot, the center has always been the battle between the third generation of Slayers and Yureva. The other two cornerstones will also appear in the middle, the Mind Reader and the Dreamer. They will deal with the Slayers from different standpoints. So, among the three eras, which era are we in now? Garen asked. The first era. That is, when the Savior and the Slaughterer first came into contact, the vulture only helped Yurevar from the side and did not officially intervene in the battlefield. In this era, Yureva almost single-handedly solved the Slaughterer. Also, it can be regarded as the most peaceful era. Kong Xingqiu sighed. That's why we dare to follow Yureva everywhere. If it were the second and third eras, the bloody and chaotic era, we wouldn't dare to do this so obviously. Then what's your real purpose? Garen asked. It's no good, so it can't be so obvious, right? Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 1184. Of course it's for the benefit. Kong Xingqiu nodded. I'm not afraid to tell you. Many people know this secret, but they haven't revealed it yet. What secret? Garen was slightly curious. Something that can interest so many time travelers, even a being like the nine-tailed fox, shouldn't be an ordinary thing. Kong Xingqiu was not shy either, sitting on the edge of the bathtub with her back to Garen. The four cornerstones. The reason why they are the four cornerstones is that the most fundamental thing lies in one. That is the divine pattern. Divine marks. Yes, Kong Xingqiu nodded. Why are the four cornerstones unique from everyone else? Only the four of them have extraordinary power. This is the function of the divine patterns. You also want to get the divine mark? Garankai asked. What if it's so easy to take it back to you? Of course it's not easy to take away. Kong Xingqiu gave him a white look. However, there are so many parallel worlds. In some worlds, seniors have studied for a long time and came to the conclusion that through a special transplant operation, a little bit of the power of the divine pattern can be absorbed to a certain extent. It is not considered a seizure, but can only be absorbed a little. But even this is already very remarkable. Once you get it, you can freely use the power of divine patterns in many other worlds outside of this world. Although it is not so abnormal, it will basically not be affected by the rules of the world. It's the benefit of the power you get from the low martial world. It's the same power you get from the Mother River system, and it applies to most of the world's rules. Garen nodded in understanding. Then what is the main use of the power of divine patterns? There are 4 types, corresponding to the 4 cornerstones Kong Xingxiu simply explained to him. The first one is naturally the Slayer Divine Mark, the second is the Mind Reader Divine Mark, and the third is the Dreamer Divine Mark. Patterns, the fourth is the Divine Pattern of Salvation. Divine patterns allow us to possess part of the abilities of the 4 cornerstones, but they are equivalent to a weakened version. The advantage is that it can be used in any other world. The disadvantage is that it is not very useful in the world of high-end military force. So some people want it, and some people don't care. Just like Poseidon, they don't care. Garen understood. Right. Basically understood. Garen touched his chin. For us time travelers, the divine patterns of the killers and mind readers are naturally the first choice, followed by the dreamers and saviors. The use of the divine patterns of the saviors should be restricted. It's very harsh, that's why it's so unpopular. Yes, Kong Xingxiu smiled, as long as you understand, what I want is the mind-reading divine pattern. Ninetales wants the killer, and everyone else probably wants different categories. This thing is because it is a weakened version, you can get multiple copies, and each divine pattern can be given to 10 people at a time. But the conditions for obtaining it are very harsh. So everyone is working hard. Well, I'm working hard. Garen nodded. In this case, this thing won't be of much use to me. When can I go to the lighthouse headquarters? I'm more interested in going there than this. We are still in the blockade period. We have to wait until this plot comes to an end and the power of the divine pattern becomes silent again before we can start the teleportation without being aware of the rules of the universe. Now it is estimated that we will not be able to go back for a while, Kong Xingxiu explained. At least we have to wait until the end of the first era. How long exactly? About a few years. So long. Garen was speechless. After discovering the existence of the lighthouse, he wanted to go to the lighthouse more than taking his own wild path and swimming along the Mother River. If there was a more convenient way, why not use a better one? Okay. I'll just wait a few more years. After Kong Xingxiu left, Garen was bored and thought about some possible situations. A few years was not a long time for him, and he passed by in a trance in the mecha world. There were many ways to pass the time, but the power of divine patterns revealed by Kong Xingxiu aroused his interest. If he guessed correctly, the power of divine patterns should be a variation of the use of soul power. Since the 4 cornerstones can use soul power in this way, why can't he use it in this way? With this thought, his inspiration suddenly came out, and he began to practice alone, studying the use of soul power. He lived in a high-end hotel building in Ceylon for a long time, and occasionally returned home. His explanation to Kong Yuan was arranged by the government, and he reported to go to college in advance. Occasionally, the Ministry of Security would send someone to contact him to carry out some difficult tasks. But there were not many times, and galleons were all completed successfully. Before I knew it, more than a year had passed. Garen has also gained a certain reputation in the world, with a success rate of 80%. This is already a very impressive figure for the high-end military force of the Slan Kingdom. The unsuccessful missions are basically to find someone. Garen simply gave up on such troublesome matters. In the Ministry of National Security, the nickname given to him by the superiors was simply Sword Master. While they were living a leisurely life here, Yureva had already experienced another meeting with the top vulture masters. The fourth-ranked master was defeated by Yureva. The third-ranked master voluntarily surrendered, and the second-ranked master was defeated by Yureva. Tied with Yureva. The final number one night a year later, severely tortured Yureva before the situation calmed down. During this year, Yureva traveled around, looking for his mother's path, wandering around the world with his sister. He experienced a lot without even thinking about it, and his experience surpassed that of many adults older than him. At the beginning, he would occasionally come to the hotel to ask questions about Garen's sword skills. Later, he would just visit Garen more often. He would come to visit Garen with the etiquette of a disciple treating his master. As for sword skills, Garen had nothing to teach him anymore. Due to the rules of this world, higher levels cannot be used, and extreme things cannot be taught. To put it simply, Yureva has already left. Yureva is now only slightly worse than Galleon. Except for Galleon's trump card that forcibly raises the level of the bottom of the box, the two of them will win or lose, basically at a ratio of 40 to 60. Due to cost issues, Yureva would occasionally take some government-issued tasks from Garen. In fact, these tasks were given to Garen from above, but they were outsourced to his disciples, and he shared half of the remuneration. If Yureva hadn't been unwilling to join the government, he wouldn't have taken this approach. Snapped. The teacup is placed gently on the glass coffee table. Yureva breathed out hot breath gently, and the aroma of tea in his mouth soothed him slightly. He raised his head and glanced at Garen sitting opposite. Minister, how many people have you recruited for unrestricted fighting? Why are the people we contacted this time our old classmates? He asked with a frown. No way, the benefits are great, Garen replied lazily. The Unlimited Fighting Club has basically separated from the school and become an independent organization. Some of the people who are willing to stay will occasionally take over the subcontracted tasks I outsource. The rewards are huge and the risks are not big, so everyone is naturally willing to do it. What's wrong with this? Although it's not a big problem because you personally took action when something happened, but the higher UPS really don't care about this kind of thing. Yureva rolled his eyes. You are nakedly using public funds to support private soldiers. What a private soldier! Garen laughed and cursed. Look at those guys, if anything happens, they will definitely be the first ones to run away. Okay. Anyway, I'm used to it. Yureva leaned back on the sofa and changed into a comfortable position. He was wearing a white windbreaker, long jeans, and a beard that hadn't been shaved for an unknown amount of time. He looked unusual. Mature. It doesn't look like he is just 16 or 17 years old at all. More than a year of running around, fighting everywhere to investigate the whereabouts of his mother, has also brought him more and more mature experience. Tell me, why did you come to me this time? I knew your kid was fine and would never come to me, Garen said lazily, holding a teacup and wearing a white nightgown. Hey, I knew I couldn't hide it from you. Yureva smiled flatteringly. It feels a bit disgusting for a man who looks like an uncle to make this expression. Speak quickly. Don't wait any longer. Garen felt a little nauseous. Yureva straightened his expression. That's right. Although I still haven't found my mother's whereabouts when I went out this time, I have a vague feeling that my mother seems to be avoiding me on purpose. Avoiding you? Why? I don't know. Yureva frowned. This is also what worries me. And what? Garen took a sip of tea. And this time when I went out, I met a strange man. He seemed to know me. He suddenly came over and whispered to me that the target I was looking for was dead. He asked me not to waste my efforts and go back to meet up, Yureva said. His face was baffling. Meet? Garen was also a little confused. He said the target you are looking for is dead? Could it be? That's not what you mean. Yureva shook his head. He seems to think that I belong to some kind of organization. Meeting? Who to meet? Where to meet? He didn't say anything about these things. Waiting for me when I turned around, he disappeared, which was very weird. Later, on the way back, I accidentally received a small note, which said that I was in danger. I was asked to burn the note immediately so that no one else could see it except me. Urawa completely confused. Are you burned? Burned? I didn't tell anyone about this. I only mentioned it to you now. I suspect that I may have been involved in some other incident. Garen sorted out the intelligence information he had received. There was nothing in the plot about Urawa's situation. The nine-tailed fox and others were secretly paving the way for Urawa in other countries, and there was nothing unusual about the news that came back. The only thing wrong is that the slaughterer and others who should have appeared have not yet appeared. According to the plot, they should have appeared very early, but there is still no news yet. Well done. Don't tell anyone else about this, including your sister. Telling this kind of thing will have no use other than causing more trouble. It will naturally become clear when there are more clues. Garen explained. I will use my connections to help you check and find out who is in contact with you, whether they want to mislead you or what.